Hello, welcome back to the Property Empress podcast. My name's Richard, and with me is Anna Pierce. Good afternoon, Anna.
Hello, Richard. Good morning, because it's going to go out in the morning. Good morning, everyone. Just because we've been talking for the last 3 hours.
Today's episode, we are going to be talking about something a little bit different and not as structured as I think it normally is about property specifically. So we want to talk about who actually controls the property market. Now, this is probably a subject that you could go on for hours and delve into all sorts of angles. But we've just been discussing it off air. And it's actually very interesting. And I know Anna has got a whole ream of things she wants to share about this. So, Anna, where do you want to start with this? Who controls the property market?
Who does control the property market? Yeah, no, thank you so much, Richard. And it's nice to have you back because I had to go solo last week. But yeah, this is a really
my fault.
Important. It's absolutely fine. Like you're going through a lot at the moment with the house move and stuff. So, but yes, it's a really. I did a TikTok, I think a few weeks ago now, and I talked about what they don't want you to know about the property market or something, or what's going on in the property market, what they don't want you to know. And I got a lot of people saying, who's they? And I've avoided answering this because I wanted to get my thoughts straight, because I've been doing property for 12 years and it's one of those things, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know kind of thing. So I'm still a student to the property market. And I've had this really, with everything that's been going on in the market for the last few weeks, with the interest rates, inflation, and prices now dropping, I've really had quite a few light bulb moments. So that's what I wanted to share. I wanted to talk about, like, this has been a long time coming, but especially in the last few weeks, I'm really starting to understand this idea of the property market being controlled. And it sounds very conspiracy theory, but I'm going to try and keep it very factual, very clear. And obviously, as always, people can write in if they've got any questions or anything to share. But I kind of want to take it back, because one of the things I've always said, if you follow me and if you listen to podcasts and stuff like that, you'll kind of know that I've always talked about that I don't really buy into this boom bust idea. So a lot of people talk about the fact that property market booms and busts, and I'm like, well, if you look at the history of price data, you can go to Land Registry, download it. And the history of price data, which goes back to the 60s, which isn't a huge amount of data because property is very slow, but it is the best data we have. And it's trusting the data we've been given is correct. So when you look back, we've had 2 price drops in the history of price data. So in the 1990s, where they put interest rates up to 17%, it meant that loads of people were repossessed. People couldn't afford to buy houses. So basically it meant that people were struggling. So the property prices dropped because people couldn't afford to buy. And then obviously in 2007, the banks went under and all the subprime lending and all that stuff went on. And I want to look more into that at some point. But basically, the property prices came down again then. But that was very much to do with the banks. It was kind of interest rates. The first time the banks going under is what we're told for the second one. So this idea of, well, prices just have this natural cycle, I was like, well, not really. For me, it feels like it goes up and then occasionally we have an anomaly. So then there's the 18-year property cycle, which we've talked about before. And again, I said at the time, I was like, what my understanding is they've used the land price data for hundreds of years, and they've looked at that to work out property prices today. And I was like, how is that comparable? When we buy mortgages, the world is so different today than it was 300 years ago. It just didn't make sense to me. So I've never bought into this boom bust. Like, I've been very honest about that. And I said, I don't mind being wrong. You know, I'm going to trust that that's not the case unless I find out otherwise. So I think a few podcasts ago, I actually did a podcast with, do I think prices are about to drop? And I said, no, because I said, well, I don't see why they would, just because they're going up. It's a whole different ballgame than stocks and shares and things like that. There are natural fluctuations. Like, there's naturally seasonal fluctuations. So I was like, I just don't see why it would happen. And that's kind of then pretty much since I did that podcast, then all this stuff has happened and I've started to understand. So basically what's happened is We've obviously had, they've started putting interest rates up because we're being told inflation has gone really high. So they have to put in interest rates up to try and bring inflation down. And just so you know, because I thought, well, maybe if property prices come down, that'll help inflation come down. It's actually not linked. So I looked into it. They look at like a basket of goods to work out what inflation is, basically, how prices have changed. I have also, while I was researching that, I've also discovered they can manipulate those numbers. They can actually change the goods in the basket. So if they want to say, well, we need to put interest rates up, they can potentially change I don't know. I don't know. I'm on the fence about that, but apparently it's not as clear cut as we are led to believe, is what I'm saying. But basically, inflation went really, really high. And we've seen it, like the cost of living is very expensive and things like that. We've seen, so it makes sense that kind of, is what has happened. So they've put interest rates up to bring down inflation. So the first thing that really got me was that they put base rates up to 3%, but mortgages were like 6%. So the banks didn't go to 3%, they went to 6%. And I was like, why have they done that? And basically, I was trying to think when it would have been. I think it was in June. No, the last time, I can't remember, sorry, the timescales have gone off. But when I was teaching my last buy-to-let course, it was around that time I spoke to my mortgage broker, and he said, when I was talking about the interest rates and things like that, he told me the interest rates, and I was like, that makes everything unaffordable. Like, you can't do property. The rates that they put like to 6%. I was like, it just doesn't work. So on my course, I was saying they're going to have to bring them down. And I realized that the banks were going to have to bring them down because otherwise it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And if you're taking out all the landlords, everything is effed. I'm not going to swear. Everything is effed. So it was all these seeds, basically. I'm very conscious as well. I'm probably not making much sense, but bear with me. So there were these seeds being sown for me. And then I've had subsequent conversations with my mortgage broker. And basically he was like, the banks do not want to lend to you. They're lending at 70% loan to value. They're doing 5.8% interest rates fixed for 5 years. So I was like, they are specifically saying, we do not want to lend to you. And I was like, maybe it's because prices are about to drop. And then I realized that they were bringing prices down. And that was basically that was my big, like, one of my many light bulb moments. I realized that the bank, because I was like, why are the banks acting this way? And it will all become apparent in a minute. But basically they put interest rates up above what it should have been, stops lending, basically. And of course, now prices are starting to drop because if you have no one buying and the mainstream media are feeding you this narrative of this bust cycle, then it's starting to have prices drop. So then I started looking back and I started thinking about things. And I went back to the pandemic because I started thinking, well, why would banks be doing this? So I went back to the pandemic and I was remembering because we had, just before the pandemic, we had Brexit. Do you remember all the mainstream media were like, oh, property prices are about to crash. And they didn't crash. And I was like, doesn't make sense to me why they'd crash. So then we had the pandemic. And I remember having a conversation with Drew saying that the property market is being paused. It's because he said, I wonder if, what's going to happen with prices. I said, well, it's being paused. I was like, I think we'll see nothing really happen. And then when we open again, it'll bounce back. And that's exactly what happened. But around the same time, the government's best advisors said prices are going to drop. So they incentivized the market. And I was saying at the time to Drew, I was like, what are they doing? I was like, they're overcooking the market. I was like, their prices were never going to drop. And they've created this crazy boom. And I don't buy into the boom bust, but I was like, well, when you throw incentives at a market that's doing quite well anyway, it just went whoosh. And we've seen the last 3 years of prices going insane. But just because they've gone insane doesn't mean they're going to drop unless you suddenly whack interest rates up really high. You tell everyone that prices are going to drop. And I was like, again, I just sat back and I thought, this is all orchestrated. That's why it didn't make sense to me, because I was trusting that the banks were doing what I had been told they do, basically, which is they're regulated. We have a separate monetary policy committee doing base rates. We have the government setting policies, and all that kind of went out the window for me, basically, when I started looking deeper into this. So then I started going a little bit deeper again, and I was like, well, the banks are regulated. So how are they able to do this? And basically I went down a bit of a wormhole, and it's stuff that I've known for a long time, but everything seemed to kind of tie together. So actually there's a couple of things. So the banks are owned by, there's a group of families that started most of the major banks, and they also own the mainstream media. So you have the people that own the banks, the mainstream media, like they're connected. So when you have like what the mainstream media do is they affect how people think and how people feel and their understanding. So when we're fed by the mainstream media that landlords are the problem, they're the ones taking first-time buyers' houses, they're pushing house prices up. That's why I get vitriol on my social media, and I believed it. I believed it myself because I used to read the mainstream media, and I was like, why am I getting blamed for buying these cheap, disgusting houses that are unmortgageable, first-time buyers wouldn't buy? We're putting cheap offers in, so we're definitely not putting prices up. Why am I getting bought? If I buy like 5 houses, I'm not having a huge effect. Like because I used to work in pensions, so I know most pension schemes invest in property. I was like, you have a multi-million pound pension scheme owning property, so the corporate landlords, a whole different ballgame, but they're not a face. I get people messaging me, begging me not to buy houses. And I'm like, I'm not the problem. And then when you realize, so more recently, what we're having is the banks are all announcing that they're going to be buying a bucket load of houses. They're going to go nuts. So then I was like, what's the actual hell? So the banks are forcing prices up. Oh, I've missed an important part. But the banks are basically pushing prices up. They're pushing prices down, and then they're going to buy houses. Like, you can't have that. You can't have that. Like, you can't have that with in stocks and shares. Again, I assume, I don't know, maybe they do. But you're not meant to be able to manipulate the prices to your advantage. And then when you add in the fact they also own the media and they're helping us to, because prices will only come down if people are told prices are going to come down. Like, there's no reason why prices should come down. And, unless the rug is pulled out, we're told. And actually, prices wouldn't come down if we weren't so dependent on mortgages. So the other thing I wanted to say, because it is a little bit scattergun, I do apologize, but I'm trying to get all the information and I'll try and pull it together at the end. But when we talk about the house prices, like, again, I get told I'm pushing up house prices because landlords are buying properties. When you actually look at it, and again, this is a light bulb moment for me quite a long time ago when someone posted on commented on one of my videos on TikTok, and they said that house prices are what they are because the average UK house price is 2 times the average UK salary, 2 times the average UK salary times 4.5 times. So basically, because almost everyone tends to buy with mortgages and they tend to max out the mortgage. Like, so you get told you can borrow like 4 to 5 times usually your salary. So if I was earning 50 grand a year, then, or, if our household was earning 50 grand a year, we could borrow 200 grand. So that's what we'd be buying at. So when you actually look at it and you realize literally the prices are dependent on what mortgage you can get for your salary, then it's not, and we talk about it's all supply and demand. It's not, it's the house prices are based on the lending, because that's what we're told. You have to get lending to buy a house, because who can afford, like where I live, it's like, probably the absolute cheap. I mean, we're family of 4, so we'd need like, at least 2 or 3 bedrooms. Like, we'd be spending at least 300 grand. Who has 300 grand in the bank? Again, how did it come about that we're buying a £300,000 property? It's an average person, I don't know what the numbers are. Say an average person is earning 30 grand. So in a couple, maybe they're earning on average 60 grand. Who can afford 300 grand's property? Who can afford 300 grand? We've been told you can use mortgages and pay them down over the lifetime. I'm sure the original intention was very good and pure, but the profit side has come in. So when you understand that property prices are so high because of the mortgages, and of course, when you look at all of this, who's benefiting from people using mortgages buying properties that are really, really, because everyone goes property prices are really high. Who's benefiting from that? Well, the banks are making the interest. They're not borrowing at the rates they're giving to you. They're borrowing much cheaper, and they're making profit from that. It's not their money either. They're printing money and they're borrowing money. But the banks are profiting from the fact that house prices are high. Who is profiting from the fact that interest rates have gone up? The banks, because like I said, they didn't go up to 3%, they went up 6%. Who is profiting from the fact that house prices have boomed over the last 3 years? The banks. Who is profiting from them coming down? Because surely the banks wouldn't be profiting, because if prices come down by 10%, they're losing part of their, but they're not. If you get repossessed, say the interest rates go up and you get repossessed, the banks take the property and there's not enough equity for them to get all their money back. And so if they basically have to sell the property, they take the property off you and they put it on, they sell it cheap to get it got sold. If you owe them 100 grand and they sell the property for 90 grand, they will still come for you for that 10 grand. The banks will not be out of money if you get repossessed. You will be out of money, but they won't be out of money. So the prices coming down doesn't affect the banks. But when you realize they're buying cheap houses, they're cleaning up the cheap properties. Like every step of the way, the banks are making all the money. So the banks have a massive influence. I hope I've made all of this clear. And it's not perfect. It's not, I've missed bits. I've probably misunderstood some bits. But the energy of what I'm understanding, when you look at who benefits from all this, it's the banks, the banks, the banks, the banks, the banks, added into the fact that the people that own the banks also own the mainstream media. And you can look into this. This isn't, this is very well understood. You can go on TikTok. It was one of the places I was looking, like trying to understand the history. Again, it's not that, you can really go down a wormhole and people are like, these I know there's a lot of theories about these families. For me, I don't think anyone really has, I don't think particularly a family setting up a business that happens to be a bank. I'm sure it was originally with beautiful intention. But I think as you take away as you then get into it's a business that has to make money and it makes a lot of money, then it becomes about money making. And then that's, the goodness can get pulled out of it sometimes. So, yeah.
I think you're more generous than me. I think that I think there's always been intention. I don't think they've ever had good intentions. I think the plan was people need money and we can rinse them for it. I think it's as simple as that. And then they've just grown that as a business. I mean, again, they're there to make money. The banks are there not to keep your money safe. They're there to make money for themselves. And the fact that they're buying, like I said, they're not buying 5 houses.
Yeah.
They're buying 50,000 at a time.
And of course, how do we know this? We get told through the mainstream media. So the way that it is told to us is done, very matter of factly, very like it's all to control the messaging and to control like how we perceive it. Because if anyone else did it, can you imagine if like Elon Musk, manipulated this Tesla shares or the Twitter shares and then said, I'm going to force the price down. I'm going to, bomb the pricing. Then I'm going to buy loads of them. Like there'd be uproar, but because it's the people, people doing it, controlling the messaging. But I don't want to share all of this. I think this kind of information, you have to be ready to hear it, like, because it is very confronting. Maybe you should have put a trigger warning on the beginning of this. It's very confronting because it's very unsettling to think that what we're being told is not the truth. And I think it's taken me 12 years to get to this place. So if you're new to this, I'm giving you this information, it might be quite difficult to take. And like I say, this is my understanding, my interpretation. I'm very much, if it doesn't make sense, it's probably not true. Like that's kind of how I like to think of things. But the more I've looked into this, the more it makes sense to me. I don't have all the answers. I don't know exactly how it all works. I have a lot of questions and I'm going to keep looking into this. But when it ultimately falls down to, it doesn't make sense to me that there should be this boom bust cycle. And then as we're going through this, what they would call a bust phase, I'm like, well, it's not a natural thing. This is what the banks are doing. It's the banks driving this. And I'm like, why are they driving it? And then I'm like, oh, and then I look at everything else. So, but it's not to instill fear. It's really to empower and enlighten. But also one of the things that the beautiful silver lining for me that's come out of understanding all of this is that it has shed a lot of guilt for me. I have always held back with my property investing because I've always been like, am I taking houses from other people? Am I being a horrible person? Am I doing a disjustice to society? But only this week, I've had a really beautiful conversation with one of our tenants. And it's such a small thing that they have said the bathroom's really cold. They'd really like a heated towel rail. Would it be possible to get one put in? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, not a problem. So I've got someone that's going to put it in. And then the person was like, do you want me to supply? And I said, oh, no. And I went back to the tenant and I said, oh, do you want to send me a photo of, you know, the kind of towel rail you want? And we'll get it. We'll buy one for you and get it fitted. And the tenant was like, really surprised. I mean, it's one of our long-term tenants. She's been with us for a good probably 8 years. But she was like, oh, that's so kind. Thank you so much. And I was like, why is that kind? Like, it's your house. It's your towel rail. Like, you know, it didn't occur to me that was... And then I went back to the electrician who's going to put it in. And they actually came back and said, oh, that's really nice of you to let... And I was like, what? Why is that considered? Why would I not do that? You know? And I forget, like, the way that we treat our tenants is so different from, I think, what the perception is. Probably the reality is a lot of tenants and landlords have a great relationship, but what we're fed is slum landlords and bad tenants. And it's like, no. But I've realized this week, I was like, I'm doing a good thing by owning houses, because otherwise it's going to be the banks owning houses, making more money. They're going to squeeze us, manipulate us. I'm like, the more houses someone like me and you, Richard, and our listeners can buy and be really good landlords and help, because it's ultimately around the people in the houses. It's the tenants, it's the homeowners. The more people can feel safe and secure and empowered, like, because when we're fed this, you know, because a lot of our tenants are worried about, you know, being evicted. And I'm like, we're not going to evict you. Like, you're paying your rent, you're looking after the house. We're not going to evict you. Like, we're not going to sell the houses. You know, you're fine. You know, the more people can feel safe and secure. And if you're living in a house with the bank, you know, if you've got a mortgage, know what it is you're dealing with. So, you know, be under no illusion. But the more you realize what's happening, the more you can work with the truth of the system, I guess is what I'm saying. So for me, it's about enlightening, helping as many people as possible to see the truth of what's going on so that they're not blindsided, so they can work with it. But also, if you want to be a property investor, one of the things, particularly as a woman who held me back, was this guilt. And we don't have to feel the guilt because it's not the truth. The more houses we can buy, the more tenants we can put in. You know, we specifically market DSS welcome, credit issues welcome, pets welcome. We are helping the minority of people who, hi Richard's dad. We're helping the people who are, again, really struggling. So it's a good thing what we're doing. So it's just, for me, it was a really interesting shift in my perspective, realizing that this is what I should be doing and I should be doing it more. You know, I should be buying more houses and helping more people. And also for me personally, I should be sharing how anyone could buy. If you feel you can't afford to buy your own home, anyone can buy their own home. Just don't look at mortgages, because at least half of the population can't buy their own home when they're looking at using mortgages. But if you look outside of mortgages, everyone can buy. So I need to be sharing that message. Anyone can buy their own home. And then also the landlords and tenants, like, don't listen to, you know, you can have a beautiful, beautiful, you know, partnership with your tenant or landlords. And then obviously, you know, go and buy houses and be a good landlord and work with the system, you know. So for me, what are the banks doing? The banks are buying because prices are coming down. So freaking get out there and buy some houses. This is not financial advice, by the way. But get out there and buy houses, you know.
Yeah.
And
I think
yeah, sorry, Karen.
I was saying, I think how you position that, like, if you think of yourself as like the buffer between the banks and the people, you know, you are the protective buffer, that you want to provide a good house and a good property for them to live in, and you know, you're taking the sort of crap from the bank,
yeah, so
the other people don't have to.
Exactly. I love that. Yeah, be the buffer.
Yeah, the buffer.
But yeah. So that's kind of where it's a bit different, but I think it's an important truth to share. And I just think, yeah, I'm going to share more about it on social media, I think. But I think that ultimately the message is, you know, I love the idea if people are feeling, because I think sometimes you could be like, well, I don't want to work with banks. How do I do it without the banks? And I kind of flip between that. Sometimes I'm like, well, I'll just work with angel investors and never have to work with banks again. And that might well happen. But also I'm like, I'm not going to cut off like the easiest way of me. If you work with the system, but don't become dependent on it, like work with the banks, but don't be dependent on it, then you're kind of winning overall then, you know.
Yes. Shut the door.
Are we cutting that bit? Or
No, that's
Richard's
fine.
dad's
That's
just
fine.
got home and he's just come in and talked.
Banging and making noise.
That's the thing. It's such exciting stuff that it's drawing people into the conversation. Like we're manifesting people coming in.
People at the windows. Come on.
But it isn't to scare. It's just to go, this is the reality. Let's work with the new reality. And I do genuinely apologize if I have triggered you, if this is something that you've found difficult to hear. Because I think I would have struggled with this like 12 years ago if I was starting, I think. I come from a very mainstream family, I guess, for want of better words. But I've been woken up over the last few years.
I think as long as you know that your intentions are good and you're doing this because you do, of course, look, you want to make money and a living for yourself. Of course you do. That's not a crime. That, people feel bad about making money. It's not a problem. As long as your intentions are good and you want to make money by buying houses, selling houses, renting houses out, that's fine. But you're not doing it to be like a slum landlord. You're doing it because you can provide people with good homes, a place to live. Because when you're looking for a rental place, if you're the rentee, whatever the word is for someone looking for a rental place or whatever you are, tenant, yeah. We're not allowed to call tenants anymore, are you? They've got to be
really?
called, yeah, I think that they've tried to ban that word.
Why?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Some stupid reason.
How am I not? How am I only just hearing about this?
Yeah. It's some like I don't know. Whatever you're supposed to. But I'm going with tenant anyway. If you're a tenant and you're looking for a place to rent, it's really hard because you might not be in a position to buy, so you just want the best place you can to rent, and you want somewhere secure, and you want somewhere nice, and you want a landlord that's responsive. And if we all know that we are those landlords, then what's the problem? You're providing a home, you're stopping the bank getting their grubby mitts on the house.
Yeah.
And it carries on, and then don't forget because the banks will hold those houses for forever, whereas you might be thinking, I'll hold it for 10 years, 20 years, and then you'll sell it into the market and it will go back into the market.
Of course, that's why, because the thing is most letting agencies and landlords are like, they only want people with good credit. So that's why, it's another thing. It's like, it's just interesting. The whole energy, it's not a conscious thing, but the energy of if you have good credit, then you are part of the system. Like you've been good to the banks because you've borrowed. Because if you don't have any credit, I don't know if people know this, but if you don't have any credit cards, because I remember my father-in-law once said, "Oh, I've got good credit because I don't use a credit card." I was like, "No." So get good credit, you have to have credit. Well, you wouldn't have terrible credit necessarily, but to get good credit, you have to use credit and pay it off and show that you can be responsible with your credit. They want to see a history. They want to see a footprint. So, of course, if you have shown that you've been good with credit, then no wonder the banks prefer that, and they won't lend to people who have like bad credit. Because we specifically rent to people with bad credit because we know that they will pay their rent because of how they're treated by everyone else. So yeah, it's just interesting. It just feeds
it's almost
into
it's almost like a membership for the banks, isn't it? Like, you've paid us money before in interest, because if you've had credit, you've paid interest most likely. You've paid loads of interest before to us, so you've basically paid to join our little club. So we'll let you borrow more money from us, and it's like they're doing you a favour. It's like, hey, no, you're paying for a service. You're paying a ridiculous amount for a service they're providing, which is just lending you money that is owned by someone else. Yeah, they're laughing. Let's start a bank.
You can. Do you know you actually can do that? You can start a bank. But
we'll start a property bank, and we'll only lend to investors.
Yeah, exactly. But yes, so it's a bit of a wormhole when you go down, and there's I probably missed loads of stuff off, but that's the crux of it. But I think the message really is to work with the system and not fear it, because a lot of people are like, pulling away because they're like, prices dropping, so I'll pull away. And it's like, for me, I'm the opposite. I'm like, I'm leaning in, and it's like, of course, the banks are like, oh, it's too scary to buy. But, not even secretly doing it in, hidden in plain sight. Like they've gone and they're buying loads of cheap houses. It is really interesting that they're sharing that. They're telling everyone openly we're buying loads of properties. And very interesting. And that's the thing, is once you see it, you can't not see it. And that's
No.
what I've experienced. So yeah, I think I don't believe, because the mortgages really took hold. Oh gosh, I did some research on this a while ago, but it really took hold. I think it was like the late 90s, early 2000s, if I remember rightly. So I kind of feel that, and you can see it with the Land Registry history of price data. You can kind of see, because obviously it used to be, you know, it just wasn't as widespread, and obviously you wouldn't borrow as much as you do now. So you can really see as it takes hold. So it's been decades of this. But yeah, it is very much one. So I don't think originally, I think I'm wondering whether the first price drop in the 90s, whether that was, I feel like that was maybe more of a natural thing. Whereas now I'm like, no, it's just completely orchestrated to make money by the big corporations.
Yeah. I think the key
It's not
points
the property
to take are,
market. Oh, sorry, Karen.
yeah. No. I think the key points are, don't be afraid of this. Understand how it works. There's no point fighting it, because you're not gonna win. So understand where you can fit into this sort of system, how you can use it to your benefit, and you know, once you understand where things are going, like I said, just like we were saying off air, that follow it along, follow what the banks are doing. What are the banks doing? You know, they are buying property. That's what they're doing. You know, just because they're making it hard for you to buy property because they're giving you stupid high rates, doesn't mean property is a bad idea. It's the lending to do it is a bad idea. So think of other ways to do it.
That's exactly what I was just thinking. I was like, because so many people go, I can't afford to buy. It's that you can, but you're thinking you have to use a mortgage. It's exactly the same here. You can absolutely buy houses, be a property investor, be, you know, financially stable and provide an amazing service and provide beautiful houses for people, you know. I got distracted then. I was thinking of, you gave an analogy about the seagulls before, and I was thinking, oh, we should say that analogy. And now I've gone completely off track of my point. What was my point? I can't remember. Did you want to share that analogy where you said about it was the seagulls, wasn't it, with the ships?
I said the banks are like the fishing boats, just trawling everything, and then we're the seagulls, just following the trawler. Just follow what they're doing. Pick up all the bits that they miss, with the houses they miss and the things that they give up. Just again, there's no point trying to sink the fishing boat, is there?
Exactly.
Just follow it along and pick up the bits you can.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a weird analogy. We've gone weird.
Yeah, we did. We talked about some really weird things before, but yeah.
We were talking about potatoes earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. What was it? Like, not everyone should make potato or should grow potatoes. We're talking about, and again, it kind of does apply. We were talking about variety and the fact that, you know, nature loves diversity and variety. And we were saying about the fact that, you know, that when you're working in groups, when you're property investing, you're like, and actually, I guess the way I would look at it from anyone who wants a house, like it's a primal need to have somewhere to land at the end of the day, sleep soundly, you know, have somewhere to be warm, safe, protected. So I personally think because there's this whole thing of like, again, we're kind of fed this, that the home ownership thing is a really big thing. Because in other countries, they're like, why would I own my own home? Like, everyone rents. But for us, the home ownership's a really big thing. But I think as much variety as possible is best, because we have done both. We've lived in our own home that we've owned. We've rented properties, lived in my mum's spare room as well. You know, but I think it's about choice. You know, and people who want to live in a home that they own should be allowed to do so, and they should have variety of choice for how they do so. So mortgages, brilliant. For probably a good half of the population, that's fine. For the other half, it's not that you can't do it, you just need choice for doing it. So that's why I'm always talking about, well, use all the techniques I'm talking about to buy your own home, because that's what we did. But use lease options, use angel investors, that kind of thing. So it's all choice. And it's the same thing with renting. We choose to rent because I like the freedom of because I'm not very patient. And when I'm like, right, I'm ready to move, I don't want to wait months till the house sells and the legals go through. I'm like, I want to move and I want to do it tomorrow. So I'm a nightmare to live with. So it's about the choice and about having variety. And it's like, I want to be able to, like when we were looking to move, because we only moved just over a year ago, we had, and I was talking about this as well, it's a whole, I'm not going to go into it now. We're told there's not enough houses. I don't believe that anymore. I just don't think it's the truth. personally. And I know there's lots of statistics. That's what I've always felt. Well, there's statistics. And it's like, I just don't believe it. Anyway, when we decided to move, and I had friends looking in the area. They were like, there's no houses. There's like, I can't get anything. I've been looking for ages. And I was looking for similar houses to them. I was like, oh my God. We started looking, the first 3 houses we looked at, we really liked. And the landlord, we got offered all 3 houses by the landlords. So we know what landlords are looking for. So we could pitch ourselves really well. But we had 3 houses, but we had like a trust that owned it. We had like someone who lives here, but the one we moved into, she owns it, but she lives abroad. She'll probably come back at some point. And then the third one was the property, individual property investor. So again, having a variety of landlords options is good because what would work, because a lot of people probably wouldn't want this house because we know she's going to move in at some point. Whereas arguably a trust is probably the longest, better long-term thing.
Yeah.
But as much variety as possible. So yes, coming back to your potato, not everyone should be growing potatoes. It's still relevant.
Still relevant. We got it in there.
So yes.
Okay. So
how long have we been talking?
About
that's okay.
50 minutes.
That's okay.
It's all right.
No, it's not. It's like, we need to edit. I'm at 37. Did I not start recording on time?
Oh yeah, 37. No, we're right. Okay, so like I said, this was a little bit of a different episode this week, but it's still important. Like I said, it's still important to understand where everything works and how you fit into places. So maybe next week we'll move into a more practical episode for you. How about that?
What did you have in mind, Richard?
Well, I think, do you know what? Actually, I think one of our most popular episodes was actually about rent to rent.
I knew you were going to say rent to rent. Yeah, go on then.
Because it is our most downloaded show about rent to rent. So maybe we need to break down about rent to rent, because we did that a good while ago now.
But we did. So we have done a follow-up rent to rent since. I'm sure we have. I feel like we should know more our episodes. I think we did how to get started with the rent to rent more recently. But that's a good idea. Yeah.
We'll have a look.
The thing, so with the rent to rent, my most asked question is, how do you convince landlords to rent to you? Maybe just about that entirely. Like, because we've done how to get started with rent to rent, but certainly the communication would be a really good one.
Maybe. So if you're interested and if you have a different topic you'd like us to cover, then where can people email,
Anna? You can email me at Anna Pearce, which is PEARCE.com. You can also use the contact form on my website, propertyempress.com. And you can also private message me on Instagram as well.
Wonderful. If you want to find me, I am pretty much property on Instagram. I think there's a Twitter as well, but don't worry about that. But you can just email the show, and we appreciate everybody listening and watching along now. So don't forget, actually, YouTube. Let's head to YouTube, everybody, because these podcasts are now being recorded. So if you want to see our shocked faces, then you can do so on YouTube. So,
or if you want to see Richard's dad, more importantly.
Oh yeah, little guest appearance there.
Guest appearance. Bless your dad. Bless him.
Bit of work. 75. Bit of work today. Look at that.
Is he? What's he do? Isn't he a lorry driver? Yeah. Oh, I never thought about that. He's a lorry driver and you're a train driver.
Yeah, I know. Look at that.
Not for long.
Not for long.
How many days?
126 days.
Woohoo! 126 days. Then you are officially a full-time professional property investor.
Yes, I am. And podcaster.
Absolutely. That's very exciting.
All the links to all the YouTube and the social medias will be in the show notes. Or if you're watching on YouTube, they're in the description below, so you can find them there. So
nice.
Thank you so much. So lovely talking to you again, Anna.
Yeah, thanks so much, Richard. Thank you, everyone, for listening or watching, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody. See you later.
Bye.
I can wave now, and it makes sense. See?
Yeah.
I used to do it audio only, and no one knew.
See you next time. Bye.